Colin Cowherd and Mark Schlereth, why Russell Wilson and the Broncos did not work out. Messy situation. Russell Wilson recently released, some would say, by the Broncos, ending a horrible tenure in his post-Seattle days. So the question is, why didn't it work out? I think it didn't work out because Russell, really a combination of things. Nathaniel Hackett did not help anything. The fact that Nathaniel Hackett was in horrible, absolutely horrific coach, one of the worst coaching tenures we have ever seen, did not help Russ. Russ at times in Denver looked okay. To me, it looked like he lost a little bit of his physical ability. What made Russ so good in Seattle was his ability to run, his ability to escape. He just kind of quit doing that. He quit doing it, and I think once he lost that, it changed him as a passer. He started to kind of hesitate, started to not trust himself. And then the interceptions and just everything else came. But he was a shell of himself. I mean, he did not look good. A lot of people think it might be off the field stuff as far as like, Russell just believes in all of this hype and all of this off the field media and all of this, all the nicknames he gives himself and all that. Maybe that's leaking into it. I don't know. But just on the field, it is definitely a different version of Russell Wilson, the Denver version, than what we saw in Seattle. Sean Payton comes in. If Sean Payton can't fix a quarterback, then something's broken. That's just how I look at it. I trust the guy. He's an offensive genius. He's worked wonders with Taysom Hill. He worked wonders with some combination of Trevor Siemian, Ian Book, Jameis Winston, whatever. So the fact that he had someone like Russell Wilson, he couldn't get that to work for a long term, because like I said, for a stretch there, it did look like Payton had Russell going, but Russell did not cook for very long. And then I believe the Broncos, somebody double check me here, I believe the Broncos saved something like $20 million or $30 million by releasing him now versus, just kind of like letting him play out another season. So that's probably another reason why they did it, just to go ahead and save a little bit of cash on this bad investment and start building for the future.
Free Mark Schlereth, 3-time Super Bowl champ, multiple-time Pro Bowler. When stuff happens with Denver, he's a popular radio host of note in Denver in the morning. We always bring him on. Let's start with this. I thought, there was a moment early, there was a quote by Seth Wickersham, had it in an article, that basically Sean Payton said to Russell Wilson, stop kissing babies. You're not running for office. And to me, that was a moment of clarity.
And that's kind of the off-field stuff where, Russell, it seemed like Russell really cared about his image. He really cared about this persona, all of this weird social media stuff he was doing, all the things he was doing off the field. So I don't know if his mind was already in business or was already in his ventures post-playing or whatever it is, but that does lend a little credence to that.
These are not the same guys. Sean's the anti-politician.
Yeah.
Sometimes inappropriate, harsh.
Sean's a prickly pear now.
Ultimate politician. That stuck out to me as the moment that I kind of thought, it's not going to work. Was there a moment for you early that stuck out where you thought, yeah, this is clunky?
Yeah, I think for the most part, for me, Colin, it's when you actually start to break down the film and you see so many of the throws in the middle of the football field, anticipatory throws, in-cutting routes, where you've got to throw it with timing and anticipation that are there that are going to come open, where Russell decides to pull the ball and scramble around. And those are the things that will drive you crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about, where a lot of it can be off the field, but when you just look at the tape and when you just watch him play, it's a different player. The timing wasn't there. His throws just weren't there. And Russell has always been a highly accurate, one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL. And once all that went away, on top of him getting older, on top of his escapability and his mobility just in general kind of depleting, I mean, he really was just nothing doing. Absolutely nothing doing. I will say this, though. So the Broncos just traded away Jerry Jeudy for a 5th and a 6th. So it's not all Russell Wilson. It is kind of this whole roster was just, I don't want to say bad, I don't want to say rotten, but they did have some pieces that just weren't working. I mean, the fact that they cut Russell Wilson, their franchise quarterback, and they traded Jerry Jeudy, their franchise wide receiver, for a 5th and a 6th, it does tell you a little something about how they value those players. So I think Sean Payton and Denver are just doing a full roster rehaul, just a full cultural roster rehaul of like, this doesn't work. These players aren't as good as they think they are. They certainly aren't as good as we're paying them. So let's go ahead and move on now Let's go ahead and cut bait now and start and let Payton build this thing from the ground up, which is interesting because Sean Payton has absolutely proven in the past that he can do that with New Orleans. But my question is, does Sean Payton want to do that? Sean Payton, it seemed like he was coming back to the NFL and he was going to try and find a winner, and he was going with the Broncos, one, because he got paid an absolute ton of money. Absolutely. I mean, he basically has equity in Walmart with how much money he got to coach there. But I thought he was going to try and coach there to win. I don't think Payton believed he was going to be in like a 3-4 year rebuild. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the draft. They have a top 15 pick. So if the Broncos go and get someone like Bo Nix, someone like J.J. McCarthy, then we'll see what Sean Payton can do. But it's going to be an interesting 2 years to see how quickly Payton can get Denver going.
He's a coach who wants to be thrown on time with a purpose. And so that lack of schematic fit, right? That ability to pull the ball down when you are protected and scramble around, and you end up taking sack after sack, and you're putting yourself behind, the chains. Those are the things that don't necessarily jive well with Sean Payton. He wants.
Great point from Schlereth that Payton's offenses are very timing based, very short, very efficient, very accurate route trees. Get the ball to a spot quickly and know why you're doing it, the Drew Brees type situation. So the fact that Russell is one of those guys who he's going to pull it down, he's going to move around in the pocket a little bit, he's going to slide around, whether it's to escape the pocket or just buy more time. If he's doing that and Payton's watching his plays basically get blown up, then yeah, I can see why that would cause a serious rift.
Precision. He wants execution. He wants a Drew Brees type of quarterback who can function and who can process information in just a split second and make the right decision. And those are not things that are part of Russell Wilson's skill set. So when you started watching the film, you realize, wow, this does not mesh very well.
Yeah.
So if somebody, let's say Kirk Cousins leaves Minnesota, let's say Pittsburgh can look at tape. What would you give me some positives with Russell? Because I never thought he was washed. I just think he's the latest mobile quarterback. Donovan McNabb's an example that aged quickly.
Yeah.
Cam Newton aged quickly.
Well, Cam was a little different. Cam had an arm issue. Cam had the arm injury, and then I think he had the same problem Peyton Manning did, where the surgery didn't take. I'm not a medical professional, but I'm pretty sure with that type of surgery, you can have where it doesn't take and you basically lose function to make the same throws. Like your arm doesn't work the same way. We saw Peyton kind of lose the zip on his ball or not really be able to throw the ball at all. He had like nerve problems at the end. And then Cam, he couldn't come over the top anymore. Everything was sidearmed and everything was like real short. His arm didn't work the same way. But Russell did age quickly, and mobile quarterbacks like McNabb, who they're not Michael Vick, but they have some escapability. Once they lose that escapability and they turn more into Ben Roethlisberger, they turn into a guy who's just back there relying on his arm. That is a huge blow to these kind of guys. And that's a huge blow to Russell Wilson. Like I said, in Seattle, he was dangerous on the ground. He was a dangerous runner. His ability, he was very similar to Patrick Mahomes, where Patrick Mahomes is not a burner. Patrick Mahomes is not he's not Lamar Jackson, but Patrick Mahomes can get you on the ground for 60, 70 yards before you know it. He can turn a 3rd and 10 into a 25-yard rush in a heartbeat by escaping it and making things happen. Russell used to be able to do that. He can't do that anymore.
Sometimes more mobile guys do. What did he do that you looked at and thought, oh, that's serviceable, that does move? Because he did finish right up there with Mahomes in terms of total touchdowns, up there with Mahomes and Lamar. I mean, he was up in that class. What does he do that you liked on film?
Well, he still throws the deep ball exceptionally well.
He's always been an incredible deep ball thrower. I'm sure it's not as good as it once was, but he can really, his accuracy far down the field is unbelievable.
His ability to extend plays, scramble around, and he's still got athleticism. He still has big-time arm talent. So none of that stuff is a derogatory statement on Russell Wilson. He's still got all those abilities. So I think, to me, what you have to be able to do is you've got to be able to play stellar defense. You've got to be able to run the football exceptionally well. And when things break down, your initial read is done, You've got to give him opportunities to scramble around and make plays. You've got to have a great kind of second schedule throw, meaning, hey, when things break down or your quarterback pulls it and scrambles around, now you got to get on the run and you've got to go make plays outside the parameters of the route combinations that we actually put in. So those things he still does really well. And in that style of offense and in that style of football team that's got a stellar defense, I think you could be very successful.
They have a 12th pick. I always think Bo Nix because of the way he plays. He's Drew Brees.
Yeah, Bo Nix certainly fits what Sean Payton wants to do. He knows where he's going with the ball, athletic enough, accurate. He's going to get into a system. He's going to throw it with purpose, like Colin said. Bo Nix is more of that, I think, and it's so high though for him. Like they're picking at 12, I think, 12 or 13. That's so high for Bo Nix. I mean, to me, I have him like a second round grade. So to take him top 15, it seems like a reach to me.
With mobility, highly accurate. At Oregon, a lot of stuff was schemed up for him, but that's what Sean Payton likes. All scheme it up, you deliver it, move if you have to. But you like J.J. McCarthy, the Michigan kid who is flying up the draft boards according to multiple sources now. What is it about McCarthy you like and know?
McCarthy's kind of the same thing when it comes to here's the system, play inside of the system, make the throw. I think he's a little more raw than Bo Nix. Bo Nix is probably a little more of that like finished product as far as like a prospect goes, as far as like what you're drafting. McCarthy has a little bit more of a mystery around him, but I just don't think both of them. I don't think either one of them is worth a top 15 pick.
Pre-snap recognition and an NFL-style pre-snap offense. So you have to understand that college football has gotten to the point where it's very static formationally, right? They're going to get you in spread 3-by-1, 3-by-2 empty, whatever the case may be. And you're going to basically not have progression throws, but you're going to pick your number one target. And you're going to say, that's the guy I want to throw it to. He's my best matchup. And you're going to throw it to that guy. And so there's no real progression. I talked to Bill Lazor, who's with the Houston Texans, about quarterbacks and picking quarterbacks. And he said something very poignant to me. It's not about who the best college quarterback is. It's about who's the best college quarterback with the most transferable skills. So
yeah, that is the truth because, I've said it for a long time, like, you can't take what they did in college with you to the pros. All you can take is the foundation. You can take the physical tools, the mental makeup. You can take that. But the Heismans, the conference championships, the bowl games, their performance, they don't have the same coaches. They don't have the same players around them. They don't have the same competition. They're not living in the same place. They're not working out in the same place. Like everything is different. So the college accolades end now. I think if I'm drafting quarterbacks, I'm not looking at them like, oh, this guy went 12-1 last year. This guy went undefeated. This guy won 7 games. I throw all that away. I don't care who they played. I don't care their stats. I don't care their record. I don't care their awards. I don't care any of that. All that's done. You have to look at them as, the physical makeup, the mental makeup, how that transfers to your team, how that transfers to the NFL, and that's it. It's a really tricky thing, and I think people do get caught up in the accolades when they're looking at these quarterbacks.
So J.J. McCarthy is probably the only guy that runs an NFL pro-style offense at the line of scrimmage, meaning he's got different personnel groupings. He's calling plays. He's not just looking at the sideline going, okay, what do those cards say? Oh, it's barn, chicken, rooster. Let's go. Barn, chicken, rooster on 2. That's not what they're doing in Michigan. It's a pro-style pre-snap. You're motioning. You're in charge of flexing tight ends and motioning them across the formation and using.
Now, the question for a team is, how much do you value that? Do you value, let's say Jaden Daniels was not doing that. Do you believe that the physical difference between McCarthy and Daniels is big enough? Or do you believe that you can teach Jaden Daniels that fast enough to where it won't matter? Right? Because if you're thinking, okay, J.J. McCarthy was doing these pro-style things in college, Jaden Daniels wasn't, well, they're both going to be doing it in the pros. How fast do you think Daniels can catch up? Because if you think Daniels can learn quickly, if you think his mental makeup is there and you think he can figure this out and he can do the same thing, I can teach him that. If that's where your mind is, then that really doesn't matter as far as the fact that he did it at Michigan, the fact that he was one of the few prospects doing it, if you think you can catch your guy up. Now, if you think your guy can't, if you're drafting somebody and you're like, he's not going to be able to figure this out, he's not going to put in the time, he's not going to put in the whatever, it certainly matters. Absolutely. 100% matters for sure. And that is worth noting that, or it's an interesting note that McCarthy was doing that in Michigan, and he obviously, out of all of the quarterbacks, he did the least in college, just as far as asked to do the least, which makes sense if they're running that kind of an offense versus the other quarterbacks who are in these like heavy, these heavy throw it around, heavy quarterback driven systems. I mean, so it makes sense where McCarthy wouldn't have the same stats if he's running that more pro style kind of system. But I don't want to get too far into McCarthy and Daniels. Now we're talking about where Russell Wilson. I want to talk mostly about Russell Wilson here. So now it's talking about where will Wilson land.
Pull that off, and you have a great team around him. Like I said, that you can take pressure, you can run the football, you can set up your play pass and your play action stuff, you can boot him out to the edge, and then you've got guys in that wide receiver room that are big-time beasts that have the ability to change and alter their routes based upon when things break down. Then yes, like I would say, yeah, that would be the style with which you're going to have to play. But also the thing you're going to have to understand is we've got to play these close games, because Russ is going to put himself in harm's way at least half a dozen times a game. He's going to take 4 or 5 sacks that are his responsibility off a 3-step drop where he decides, no, I don't like that slant. I'm going to pull out here and I'm going to take a sack. Not that he's trying to take a sack, but
a team that I thought would be interesting was, so the Buccaneers, they franchise tagged Antoine Winfield. So that means they can't franchise tag Baker Mayfield. So Mayfield might go to free agency, or they had to re-sign Baker Mayfield. They're talking about possibly signing Mayfield for like 3 years, $90 million or something like that, $30 to $40 million a year. I'm not sure of what the contract situation is with Russ. I'm sure Denver's paying a huge chunk. So I would think you're going to get Russell on the cheap. If you're a team like Tampa Bay, if you're a team with a good defense, if you're a team with good wide receivers, if you're kind of a conservative team anyways, I mean, Todd Bowles is about as conservative gets. I would rather take a chance with Russell on a cheap deal, or a deal where Denver's paying most of it. I would rather that than pay Baker 3 years for $90 million. So I think Tampa is interesting for Russell Wilson, because Russell needs to go somewhere where he's not the hero. Russell needs to go somewhere where he's not the main guy. He's not the guy who's trying to get you wins. Just like Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield wasn't the guy trying to get Tampa wins. Baker Mayfield was getting the ball to their best players. Baker Mayfield was letting the defense do things, and then when he had to make a play, he did. I think Russell can do that. So I think a team like Tampa would be interesting. The Giants is the team that I've heard would be interesting. That's not a bad landing spot. Brian Daboll can absolutely work magic. Very similar. Now, it's a little different, though, with Saquon not being there. Saquon hit in free agency, so you can't really lean on him. But that's not an awful spot. Good defense, relatively decent playmakers, good tight end. Daboll worked magic with Daniel Jones. I think Russell is pretty comparable to Daniel Jones, maybe a little bit better, but pretty similar. So you might be able to get the same amount of production and get out of Daniel Jones' contract and get out of that. So those are a couple spots I would look at. Pittsburgh, I don't know. Pittsburgh, people throwing Pittsburgh around. I don't know if that one fits.
The edge players in today's, look at the draft. The edge players in today's game are running 4.40s, right?
Yeah, they're quick.
You can't outrun the edge like you did even 10 years ago. So
especially when you're aging,
dynamic there. So you're going to have to be okay with, hey, we're going to play good enough defense where we can manage some of these negative plays, where some teams are just flat not good enough to overcome those negative plays because they don't have enough defense or offensive weaponry to do that.
All right. Yeah. Mark Schlereth.
And Denver's defense was awful until the end of the year. So that is a good explanation of why Denver struggled early. Their defense just wasn't good enough to overcome some of those negative plays. They figured it out at the end, but too late. But interesting video. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think about the Russell Wilson tenure in Denver and where you think he will land next. Thank you very much for watching. Much appreciated. I will see you in the next video.